Honourable Beloff QC, Mr. Peter Chance, CEO and founder of Lee Haven. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this presentations on the Magna Carta and its relevance to the 21st century. For most of us, in our younger days, when we know about the Magna Carta, that was during the time of the Robin Hood. Robin Hood was then fighting with the barons and King George. That was the beginning of the Magna Carta. However, the Magna Carta has been quoted something like more than 150 times on both sides of the Atlantic, especially by the American court and Indian court. We do believe that the Magna Carta is a legacy that Britain has left for its many colonies and for democracy. There are 4 copies. One copy is permanently displayed at the British Library. However, if the Magna Carta is displayed at the Washington DC Museum, there might be educations and implications for many of the American presidents, especially this president. The Magna Carta has influenced the wording of the Magna Carta, has influenced the wording of the Universal Declarations of Human Rights and other human rights framework in Europe. It is a historical document, but it's highly relevant to today's society, 21st century. The speaker himself has a first-class honors in history from Oxford University. He's going to give us a historical dimensions. At the same time, he is a legendary Queen's Counsel, so he's going to give a legal perspective to some of the important issues raised in the Magna Carta. I'm not forgetting, for 10 years, he was president of Trinity College in Oxford University. It is my great pleasure today to call upon the Honourable Magna Beloff QC to deliver these presentations on the Magna Carta.
I'm truly delighted to be here in this uniquely excellent hotel, The Haven in Ipoh. Of course, as the former President Reagan used to say, at my age, I'm actually delighted to be anywhere. This is, by my calculation, the 8th time I visited Malaysia. In 1981 and 82, I appeared twice as an advocate in the High Court and Court of Appeal in a major constitutional case, almost, I believe, the last English Queen's Counsel to be admitted to plead. In 1998, I was a member of the panel of the Court of Arbitration for Sport, set up to adjudicate on sporting disputes at the Commonwealth Games. The then Prime Minister, Dr. Mahathir, had decreed that there were to be no disputes at the Commonwealth Games, and indeed there were none. In 2004, I participated in a conference of Commonwealth judges in Kuala Lumpur, founded by the United States of America, which had not been a member of the Commonwealth for more than 200 years. And in 2008, I gave a keynote speech at a conference organized by the Malaysian Bar Council to celebrate the 50th anniversary of Merdeka under the chairmanship of the former Sultan of Perak and the eminent jurist and judge Razlan Shah. And then finally, early this year, I gave a lecture at the University of Malaysia at a public policy foundation and had the privilege of meeting with other ministers, the Minister of Justice and the Minister of Sport, and there were private visits in between. But even so, after so many visits, which have sparked in me a great affection for this great country, it is a considerable privilege for me to have the opportunity to address so distinguished an audience tonight. Until 5 minutes ago, I'd been told by Peter Coe that I was to speak after dinner. But I am now, I see, speaking before dinner. But it may seem a little odd to speak to you about Magna Carta in 2017, whatever the time of day or night, rather than in 2015 or in 2016. The Charter, as you may know, went through several editions, and there's scope for legitimate debate about when the 800th anniversary should have taken place. But in order for these celebrants to be safe rather than sorry, the commemorations, both national and international, took place in 2015. Despite that, I don't wish you to think that in giving this talk 2 years later, it's because I'm somehow intellectually slow off the mark, a kind of academic Usain Bolt, but in reverse. Anniversaries are artificial occasions. They provide an opportunity for reflection and often, of course, celebration, but of themselves, they change nothing. The agents of change are the events that they commemorate, and the importance of Magna Carta is as great in 2017 as it was in 2015 or 2016. It may also seem a little odd that I should be talking about Magna Carta in Malaysia, a modern, multicultural state, far removed in terms of its composition and its customs from medieval England. Yet, as I shall seek to show, this ancient document still has significance to Malaysia as well as to England, indeed to the world at large. In the ceremony at Runnymede in June 2015, in the presence of the Queen, the then Prime Minister David Cameron said, and I quote, "What happened in these meadows 8 centuries ago is as relevant today as it was then, and that relevance extends far beyond Britain. Its remaining copies may be faded, but its principles shine as brightly as ever." David Cameron's was not an isolated voice. There were few, if any, countries in the Commonwealth, past or present, which did not celebrate the anniversary. In preparing this lecture, I found commemorative speeches by the Chief Justices not only of England and Wales, but of Canada and of New Zealand, both of whom, incidentally, were and are women, which would have astonished the exclusively masculine assembly at Runnymede. Other addresses were made by the Chief Justice of the United States, by the Presidents of the Caribbean Court of Justice, and of the Constitutional Court of South Africa, and by the Attorney General of Nigeria. These were all countries, as you will recognize, whose very existence were wholly unknown to King John and the barons who exacted the charter from him. Magna Carta was a national document, but it is one that has achieved an international impact, especially in what history has shown to be its 2 key clauses. Clause 39, which provides, "No free man shall be disaged or outlawed or exiled or in any way ruined, nor will he go or send against him except by the lawful judgment of his peers or by the law of the land." And clause 40, which provides, "To no one will we sell, to no one will we deny right or justice." It achieved such an impact despite a variety of potentially countervailing factors. First, as the Chief Justice of Canada said, I quote again, "Most of the 63 clauses of the Great Charter do not make riveting reading. They dealt with taxes, fish wares, Jewish moneylenders and blood feuds, among other pressing matters." Secondly, some of its articles were not only the antithesis of emancipatory, but actually anti-Semitic or misogynist, or to put it more bluntly, racist and sexist. Article 54, for example, provides, "No one shall be arrested or imprisoned on the appeal of a woman for the death of any person except her husband," which is no doubt a consolation to all men, except perhaps married ones. Thirdly, many of its clauses, even if they had survived, could have no application in the modern world. The fate of the relations of Gerard d'Até, set out in Article 50 of the Charter, is certainly not at the apex of today's political agenda, if indeed his bloodline has not entirely died out. And fourthly, the barons who exacted the Charter from a reluctant monarch were concerned about matters which touched upon their finances and standing. They cared little for constitutional principle. The Charter's very adjective, magna, the Latin for great, may appear to be suggestive of considerable significance, but this, like so much about it, was accidental, since it referred only to its physical size to differentiate it from its smaller companion, the Charter of the Forest. But before I leap forward from the 13th to the 21st century, I must make a brief journey through the intermediate years. Magna Carta might have had the shortest of short lives, since King John immediately reneged on the deal with the support of the Pope, who declared the Charter both null and void. And John himself was defeated by dysentery, brought on, so it's alleged, by a surfeit of lampreys. The king died, but the Charter lived. King John's son, Henry III, issued modified versions of it in 1216, 1217, and 1225. And in 1297, in the reign of Edward I, Magna Carta was for the first time embodied in a statute. However, it next suffered something of a retreat from the legal limelight. It was a kind of legal sleeping beauty, and was only awoken by two kisses of primary jurists Coke and Blackstone. On the first occasion was in the early 17th century, when King James I asserted the divine right of kings and his authority to act as a judge, and Magna Carta became the manifesto of those who opposed that extension of the royal prerogative and the consequence or correlative diminution of the rights of Parliament. It was Chief Justice Coke who was their champion, and when dismissed from his office by the King, famously declared, "Magna Carta is such a fellow that he will have no sovereign." The second occasion was in the later 18th century, during the American Revolution. The commentaries of William Blackstone, whose name has been appropriated by the chambers of which I am a member, stated that the three key rights of the individual, life, liberty, and property, flowed from Magna Carta. And as a result, it was his writings which were deployed to justify resistance to the taxes imposed by England upon the colonies, and ultimately to justify independence itself. But many of the first American states adopted parts of Magna Carta in their own constitutions, especially Articles 39 and 40. But even if Maitland, who was the greatest of English legal historians, at the turn of the last century described Magna Carta as the nearest approach to an unrepealable fundamental statute that England ever had, apart from Articles 39 and 40, the only other survivors were those which protected the privileges of the Church and those which protected the privileges of the City of London, for no reason other than that the Church and the City had been, in 1215, in the Barons' camp. Mr. Justice Darwin was a somewhat controversial English High Court judge of the early 20th century. He was better known by historians for his wit rather than his wisdom, and he was best known for riding to court on a horse in a top hat and accompanied by a groom in full livery. But it was he who said in a judgment, perceptively, "Magna Carta has not remained untouched, and like every other law of England, is not condemned to that immunity from development and improvement which was attributed to the laws of the Medes and the Persians." Curiously though, if in different degrees, Magna Carta has survived, verbatim, in two jurisdictions beyond the United Kingdom, indeed at the other ends of the earth. The Treaty of Waitangi, signed in 1840 by representatives of the British Crown after negotiation with the various Maori chiefs in the North Island of New Zealand, resulted in a declaration of British sovereignty over New Zealand. And the result of that was that there were imported into the laws of that country not only the common law but the provisions of Magna Carta as well. And if I may fast forward to the New Zealand Imperial Laws Application Act of 1998, that listed Magna Carta in the list of legislation still then in force in New Zealand. And staying in the Antipodes, Lord Wolfe, then the Chief Justice of England and Wales, in a lecture in this country in 2015, pointed out that Magna Carta has been accepted in many of the Australian jurisdictions by statute. In some, it is still almost entirely in force, notwithstanding the repeals in this country by which he referred to England and Wales. There are three further points to make. The first is that even those clauses of Magna Carta which have survived in their pristine text cannot stand against later and inconsistent legislation. The Charter has the most grandiloquent introduction. To all free men of our kingdom, we have also granted for us and our heirs forever all the liberties written out below, to have and to keep them and their heirs of us and our heirs. And it has a similarly phrased a peroration. But Magna Carta is not, and it never has been, a superior legal norm against which even legislation enacted by a democratic legislature falls to be tested and, if found wanting, to be invalidated. The Constitution of the United States is, of course, the best known, but by no means the only example of such a norm. And your own constitution in Malaysia, at Article 4.1, provides another. A recent case in 2009, called Ex parte Bancourt, illustrates both the strength and the weakness of Magna Carta in the context that I've described. It concerned what Lord Hoffman described as the sad story of the Chagos Islanders, who are inhabitants of an archipelago in the British Indian Overseas Territories. The largest island, Diego Garcia, because of its position, had significant strategic potential, and the United States desired it as a military base. Between 1968 and 1971, the majority of islanders were relocated in Mauritius, not, I emphasize, by force, but as a result of the closure of the plantation company, which was their sole source of supply of necessaries from the outside world. In 1971, an immigration ordinance stipulated that no one could enter the territory without a permit, and in 2004, belt was added to braces by a further ordinance expelling those few islanders who remained in situ. It was exile in fact, if not in name. Now, it was common ground that the challenge to the latter of these two ordinances raised issues under Article 39, because Diego Garcia was in law a British territory from which prima facie citizens could not be expelled or exiled. But, as I've already indicated, the right was not an unqualified right. Article 39 was expressly made subject to, I quote, the law of the land. And the key question which divided the majority and minority was whether the prerogative power, which had been inherited by modern ministries from the monarch, as distinct from parliamentary legislation, was sufficient to annul the right of a burden. For the minority, Lord Manson said, a constitution which exiles territory's inhabitants is a contradiction in terms. But for the majority, Lord Hoffman said, in a ceded colony, the Crown has plenary legislative authority. It can make or control the law of the land. The right of the bone is a creature of the law. The law gives, and the law may take it away. So the defeated islanders had to take their claims for return to their homeland to the European Court of Human Rights. Second point is that in any event, the value of Magna Carta's key provisions, Articles 39 and 40, have been enhanced and updated in later and more focused legislation. In England today, we would look to analogous articles of the European Convention on Human Rights, not least Article 5.4, the prohibition on arbitrary detention. And in other countries, there are similar provisions in their own constitutions which would have made, and do make, reliance on Magna Carta itself redundant. Thirdly, there are a raft of matters spreading across the realms of constitutional, human rights and procedural law on which Magna Carta is wholly silent. To give several examples: the separation of powers, non-discrimination, the presumption of innocence, or the right to counsel. So, in terms of directly applicable law, Magna Carta has all but vanished everywhere, and nor as a result can it, other than wholly exceptionally, be cited as to its letter by advocates or judges, and when it is referred to in judgments, it's often only in response to some extravagant advocate's flourish, or indeed as an autonomous judicial flourish, and is never determinative of the issue before the court. As Peter has already alluded to in a lecture that I gave at the University of Buckingham, with the aid of an electronic search machine and the information manager in my chambers, the information manager being what we used to call in happier days our librarian, I tracked down 171 references in cases of the 20th and 21st centuries, though oddly, this figure pales into insignificance compared with transatlantic statistics. Lord Sumption, the only barrister hitherto ever appointed directly to our own Supreme Court, stated that in 1991 it was calculated that Magna Carta had been cited in more than 900 decisions of state and federal courts to date in the United States, and doubtless more since, though he somewhat devalued the importance of this number by elsewhere in that lecture referring to the weight imposed on Magna Carta as the fount of modern liberty, and I quote his exact words, "high-minded tosh." It is, of course, possible, with a measure of wishful thinking, to find in the text of Magna Carta, if not the full flowering of basic principles, at least their seed. Let me mention rapidly some of those articles. Article 8 provides, no woman shall be compelled to marry as long as she wishes to remain without a husband, which constitutes a small step towards female emancipation. Article 9 prohibits the seizure of land in discharge of an unpaid debt, as long as the debtor has available chattels, which constitutes an even smaller step in the direction of modern bankruptcy laws. Article 17 provides that ordinary lawsuits shall not follow the royal court around, but shall be held in a fixed place, which constituted an improvement of access to justice, if in the purely physical sense. Then there's a trio of provisions, Articles 20, 21 and 22, which I shall forbear from quoting, which are said to contain the germ of the modern principle of proportionality. In one of the many cases, it's called Beloff against the Queen, in which the Privy Council was required with undisguised reluctance to deal with death penalty cases from Caribbean jurisdictions, the court had to determine whether a provision of Bahamian law which prescribed the death penalty should be construed as mandatory or discretionary, and it opted, it may be predictably, for a more lenient construction. And Lord Bingham of Cornhill relied on the relevant provisions, saying the principle that criminal penalties should be proportionate to the gravity of the offence committed can be traced back to Magna Carta, although more modern historians cast doubt upon the reality of that exercise. To continue my tour of the articles, Article 39 provides for standard measures of wine, ale and port throughout the kingdom, and says that weights should be standardised similarly, and in that one might detect the notion of consumer protection. Article 38 says that in future no official shall place a man on trial upon his own unsupported statement without producing credible evidence to witnesses to the truth of it, in which again is vaguely detectable the requirement of cogent, indeed corroborative evidence to justify criminal charges. And finally, Article 45 provides we shall appoint as justices, constables, sheriffs and other officials only men that know the law of the realm and are minded to keep it well, which represented a modest move towards the professionalisation of the administration of justice. Now, I've spoken of a measure of wishful thinking because the analysis that I ventured before you is anachronistic. Blackstone himself purported to discern in Magna Carta a right to trial by jury and indeed habeas corpus. But that was only also by extrapolation of the text, where these liberal guarantees are not actually to be found. And we must never forget that the liberties which were guaranteed by the Charter were guaranteed only for free men. For that reason, slavery could survive in America until the Civil War, because while the abolitionists prayed Magna Carta in aid, these slave owners and their supporters could and did retort. Well, not only did the Charter not extend right to villeins who were unfree, but also that Article 39 itself guaranteed property rights. Nonetheless, at the highest level, judges still are pleased to be able to make a plausible reference to it when issues of great magnitude are at stake. In the famous Belmarsh case, where legislation allowing for detention without trial of foreign but not British nationals suspected of involvement in terrorism, which were held to be unjustifiably discriminatory, Lord Bingham, again in the chair, said, in arguing the fundamental importance of the right to personal freedom, the appellants were able to draw on the long libertarian tradition of English law dating back to Clause 39 of Magna Carta. I've already mentioned now Blackstone's wish to source the prohibition on torture in Magna Carta, and his extravagant argument, since there's no reference to it in the text, has its more modern adherents. A case involving Binyan Mohammed, who sought in the English courts a compensation for his detention in Guantanamo Bay, in which the case authoritatively laid down that evidence obtained by torture was inadmissible in English courts. Lord Judge, the Lord Chief Justice, referred to Chapter 9 of Magna Carta in support of his argument. But Lord Bingham, who was his predecessor in that highest judicial office, noted that the fact, and I quote, that reliance was placed on sources of doubtful validity, such as Chapter 39 of Magna Carta, does not weaken the strength of received opinion, which was averse, as I repeat, to torture. Now, you may by now be thinking that the logic of all that I have said so far points to the conclusion that Magna Carta has no relevance whatsoever in the 20th century and anywhere or at all. Not so. My point is, to give the most recent example I quoted, which whoever was right in this battle of legal giants, Lord Bingham or Lord Judge, over whence the source of the common law's aversion to torture is to be found, and I am, if you'll excuse the pun, on this particular issue of Binghamist, what is his interest is that even where a decision did not turn on the meaning of Magna Carta, a senior judge thought it advantageous to make mention of it. And at the lowest level, advocates, as I noted in my lecture in Buckingham, will seek to buttress their submissions by suggesting, however implausibly, that Magna Carta was the source of such rights as those to open justice, to natural justice, to the imposition of the burden of proof on those who would deny an applicant asylum status, and the avoidance of double jeopardy. So paradoxically, the very homage paid to Magna Carta, both inside and indeed outside the court, is the best testimony of its importance as a symbol, if not a source, of directly applicable law. And in a derivative rather than direct sense, Magna Carta's influence has been still more obvious. In the United Kingdom, it fed into the Petition of Rights of 1627, the Bill of Rights of 1689, and the Act of Settlement of 1700, whose long title makes clear its links with Magna Carta, and which, importantly, it secured the independence of the judiciary, who had previously been dependent on the goodwill of the monarch for remaining in office, and of course the necessity for security of tenure and a remuneration of the judiciary has infiltrated the laws and constitutions of Commonwealth countries, indeed many beyond. Magna Carta has also inspired modern international instruments. Peter mentioned the Universal Declaration of Human Rights of 1948, which Eleanor Roosevelt wife of the President, described as an international Magna Carta for all mankind. And not only in Europe, but in America and Africa, charters guaranteeing human rights also claim ancestry to Magna Carta. Most importantly, almost 1/3 of the independent nations of the modern world were at one time part of the British Empire, and there are echoes of Magna Carta in their own constitutions. So if I put it this way, it's the progeny of the parent, rather than the parent itself, which has informed libertarian judicial decisions where the Magna Carta DNA can still be identified. Let me, to make good the point, give you a swift global tour d'horizon. Is characteristic of all such global tours, stopping off at somewhat arbitrarily selected places. I may start with the United States again. As I've already mentioned, the colonists brought English law, including Magna Carta and Cook's Treatise on the instrument, with them to the New World. Most notably, the Due Process Clause in the Fifth Amendment has an echo of Magna Carta in prohibiting federal and state or local government officials for depriving any person of life, liberty or property without due process of law. And since it became law in 1791, parties have invoked the Due Process Clause in a variety of contexts as a basis for claiming that the government has acted unconstitutionally, many quite distinct, you may think, from the intention of those who drafted that provision. For example, complaints successfully that the government acted unlawfully in limiting a woman's right to abortion or indeed same-sex marriage. Others perhaps more obviously and predictably and of great importance, Magna Carta itself, and not only the Due Process Clause of the American Bill of Rights, was invoked in the famous case of Rasool against Bush, the President of the United States, which ruled against imprisonment by the executive without judicial sanction. India is another vast democratic jurisdiction in which Magna Carta has played a grand paternal, if not a paternal, role. And Article 21 of that constitution again draws inspiration from the 5th and 14th Amendments of the United States Constitution by providing no person should be deprived of his life or personal liberty except according to procedure established by law. Due to judicial interpretation, which has been as creative, if not more, in India than in the United States of America, since the state of emergency in the premiership of Indira Gandhi, that judicial activism has led to a range of cases in which the Supreme Court of India has interpreted Article 21 in a broad manner, bringing relief to non-citizens as well as to citizens of all genders, including recently transgender persons, all races, all religions, and indeed all castes, and have brought relief not only against arbitrary actions, but also inaction on the part of the government. And in most recently, in a case in 2014, the Animal Welfare Board against A. Nagaraja, the Supreme Court stated, the universe, along with its creatures, belongs to the land. No creature is superior to any other. Human beings should not be above nature. Let no one species encroach over the rights and privileges of other species. And they provided that every species has an inherent right to life. In Malaysia, of course, you have in Article 5.1 a protection of the liberty of the person, and in Article 9.1 a prohibition on management or banishment or exclusion from the Federation. Turning across the globe to the Caribbean, Chief Justice Barrow, President of the Caribbean Court of Appeal, said, in most of the former British Commonwealth colonies, the Magna Carta is attributed to the most significant landmark on the route to establishing the rule of constitutional law, and it has influenced Caribbean jurisprudence and Caribbean constitutions. It is interesting to note, however, that not all who commemorated the anniversary of Magna Carta delivered speeches of unalloyed praise. Some certainly mixed vinegar with the honey. Chief Justice Byron suggested there was some distance to travel before the Caribbean countries which had achieved independence in the second half of the 20th century had acquired all the elements ancillary to that position. And he made 3 points. Firstly, that in not all Caribbean countries was the national the head of state, but they still owed allegiance to the monarch. Secondly, in many of the Caribbean countries, there was still a final right of appeal to the Privy Council, which was, of course, a court constituted by persons other than members of those countries and sat in London. And thirdly, he noted that in some constitutions there were transitional provisions which preserved the legal status quo ante before independence. In South Africa, the Chief Justice started his speech of commemoration somewhat more aggressively by asking, why do we celebrate Magna Carta? Have we forgotten what they, a reference to the British, did to us? But then in a more diplomatic vein, he associated Magna Carta with the South African Constitution and noted that the problems with both lay as much in the implementation as in their ideology. And he emphasised, quite correctly, that rights are of little use if people could not afford to go to court to enforce them. And he called upon the government to extend the right to legal aid and the professions to act pro bono in deserving cases. But elsewhere, even where the sour was mixed with the sweet, you will note that Magna Carta was still envisaged as an inspiration for further improvement, as a reforming, a radical, and even a revolutionary document with much to teach us. And elsewhere, with all the reservations and qualifications that I have sought to mention, the beneficial and enduring impact of Magna Carta was acknowledged both before and during the anniversary year. In Ireland, which was the first country outside England to receive Magna Carta in 1217, when it had recently fallen under English dominion, it became, in the words of an Irish historian, the cornerstone of the English common law tradition in Ireland that survives. Dame Sian Elias, Chief Justice of New Zealand, described Magna Carta as an important part of our constitution. An Australian judge, Mr. Justice Isaac, described it in 1925 in a case as the groundwork of all our constitutions, both federal and state. And Gerard Brennan, an eminent former Chief Justice of Australia, said that Magna Carta has lived in the hearts and minds of Australian people. Chief Justice McLaughlin, noting that it was in 1982 that Canada repatriated its constitution and introduced its own Charter of Rights and Freedoms, commented that the basic values of Magna Carta, liberty, the rule of law, democracy, were given constitutional status. And Chief Justice Roberts, United States, said, when we talk about Magna Carta today, we are not celebrating antiquated relics of a time long past. Instead, we are referring to a small collection of provisions that express tons of transcendent significance. My conclusion is this, that Magna Carta can claim pride of place as the first constitutional statute and an ancestor of so many across the world. An eminent legal historian has written, the immediate result, apart from the reforms contained in it, was to familiarise people with the idea that by means of a written document, it was possible to make notable changes in the law. Lord Bingham was no doubt correct once to say that Magna Carta is as influential for what it was believed to have said as for what it actually did. But myth, I would submit to you, can sometimes be as potent as reality in shaping history. What is instructive is not so much that the text has survived only in an abbreviated form, and that it is being predictably superseded by other written law. What is instructive is that 8 centuries on, it has survived at all, albeit in the spirit more than in the letter. It was, of course, of its time, but it is a document for all time. I would suggest to you that Magna Carta's eternal truth is that ultimately we are, or at any rate should be, governed by laws and not by men.
Micah, I actually discussed the Magna Carta with the Chief Justice of Bhutan, and he said that the people, the government of Bhutan endorsed the Magna Carta, especially Articles 39 and 40. That is why we are the happiest nations on earth. With Magna Carta, if no delay justice, equality, and Magna Carta was quoted by many Indian judges as well. I believe that very soon, the Magna Carta is going to be well quoted. We have a written request from the palace that your lecture and the proceedings today be recorded. His Royal Highness has picked this request. Very soon, the Magna Carta is going to be quoted, re-quoted, starting from error. Anyway, let's have time for some questions. And yes.
So, Beloff, the influence of Christian theology in the drafting of the Magna Carta, bearing in mind that Stephen Langton, the Archbishop of Canterbury, was involved in it. How much of Christian theology or the Abrahamic influence is found in the Magna Carta?
Well, you almost, with your erudition, answered the question yourself. I mean, it was of its time, and the religion, of that same established religion in England, was Christianity. But of course, the values of Christianity are not dissimilar from the values of other Abrahamic faith, or indeed from the core values of many of the religions. And that's why it should not be confined as a text which was obsolete shortly after it was drafted, but as a text rather like a tree that has new branches sprouting out in all directions, but has an essential core that is common to the way in which most of us in the modern world believe governments should act and behave.
Any more questions? Yes, please.
Yes, I have 2 points to raise. One is the name Magna Carta. Was this given to it at the time, or is it of a later origin? And my second point is there any part of Magna Carta that we may not be able to accept today, given, for example, so much development, Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and conventions and provisions international? Whether any part of Magna Carta has gone out of date, or does it still all remain as valid, you might say, that it ever was?
The answer to your first question is yes, that was a name that was given to it at the time. And as I say, the reason that the epithet Magna was chosen was not to highlight its importance, but simply to describe its physical size and contrasted with the companion Charter of the Forest. And if I may just follow up that, it's also instructive to note that some modern persons say that the Charter of the Forest, which to an extent carries within it the seeds of the concept of environmental rights, might be as useful an instrument to develop thinking in that area as Magna Carta itself. Now, in answer to your second question, well, it is quite clear that some of the provisions, indeed one might say the majority of the provisions, are obsolete, and some, as I delicately suggested, don't contain values that we would consider to be modern, liberal, or tolerant. But But on the other hand, there are the two that I cited. The one where, I believe inadvertently, I omitted to say that it's to none we deny or delay justice, and of course the delaying of justice has often been thought to be almost coincident with its denial, though I'm pleased to be informed by lawyers here who are far familiar with the Malaysian courts than I, that actually delay is not a problem in Malaysia as much as it is in many other jurisdictions. But those core values in 39 and 40, the notion that one needs authority of law to deprive someone of life, of liberty, or indeed of the right to reside in the country of his or her birth, the notion that justice should not be denied and that justice should not be delayed, it's impossible to regard those as being in spirit controversial, although it may often be that the achievement of those objectives is not so easy to fulfill. But underlying it all, I would suggest to you, is the very notion that a group of persons, in that instance the barons, were able to confront the then authority over them, the king, and to exact from the power that be at that time certain concessions which were in a direction of conferring rights, albeit limited, albeit on a limited group of persons. And out of that, I think, one has the idea that ultimately it is for the people to control, through their democratic institutions, the actions of the executive, who are the modern inheritors of monarchical power and privilege. That's, I think, really the essential lesson one derives. For barons, read the people. For the monarch, read the government. And encapsulated in that, the relationship between the two is what I think we primarily would rely upon as the legacy or bounty of Magna Carta.
The presentations from Mr. Michael Beloff was published in the Danic Law Report, full text. Any more questions? Yes.
Mr. Beloff, you referred to the American provision, Fifth Amendment. You also referred to Article 21 of the Indian Constitution, except in accordance with procedure established by law. The Fifth Amendment says no person shall be deprived of his life, liberty, or property, except under due process of law. In Malaysia, we have used in accordance with law. No person shall be deprived of his life, except in accordance with law. Mr. Beloff, in your opinion, which of these three drafts are the closest in spirit and intent to the Magna Carta?
I don't wish to seem to evade or avoid what's a very pertinent question. I suspect that if one was not a lawyer accustomed to parsing and analysing individual words and individual phrases, one would stand back and say the actual essential underlying aim is the same. And I doubt, frankly, though I may be ignorant in this area, I doubt, frankly, that anyone has chosen to juxtapose those three phrases and say, look, they drafted it differently there, and our jurisdiction, it's either more limited or it's more elastic. The essential idea is the same. The phraseology, no doubt, reflects the taste of the draftsman rather than something more fundamental. That would, at any rate, be my view. There may be historians who would quarrel with it.
That would be my view as well.
Anyone that has views?
Oh, the Magna Carta.
I
I practice law in the federal courts in Canada, and the Magna Carta was cited so many times. I think we are very competitive with the United States. The only thing is that we probably understood it better. Any other questions?
Yes.
Yes, one more.
So, now the presumptions made against the defendants, primarily in cases like terrorism act. Now, how does that sit the presumption of innocence in Magna Carta?
Well, I'm going to be very careful, as I think is appropriate, not to get involved in local, constitutional, legal and political issues. There is no doubt that underlying some of the principles of Magna Carta, in particular one or two of those that I've cited, is the notion that you do need evidence in order to inculpate someone of a crime against the law of the land, which would include a terrorist crime. There's no doubt that in all jurisdictions, and I speak of the United Kingdom, which I'm familiar, as well as Malaysia, which I have only, as it were, a derivative or second-hand knowledge. The problem with modern terrorism is that it tends to provoke in the government reactions that emphasize more the need for security of the persons at large, and some would say at the expense of those who are accused of these, who are deprived of the kinds of procedural protections that we would have in other areas of the law. Here I think one's actually entering into what is primarily a political debate. Some would emphasize security above liberty, others would emphasize liberty above security. Interestingly, and here I'm wholly about the position in this country insofar as the judges have approached matters, interestingly, in both the United States and in the United Kingdom, the courts have been vigorous in their defense of the proposition that you cannot detain someone arbitrarily or for any particular length of time without having judicial sanction and approval. There are constant debates about how long one would need for detention before one brings someone before a court. When Tony Blair was Prime Minister, he actually argued for a 90-day period, and nothing since then has come anywhere close to that. But there is still an ongoing debate in democratic countries and in other countries as to where the line should be drawn. And I know that that's a fuzzy and blurred and imprecise answer, but I think you'll respect the fact that one could spend a great deal of time analysing particular provisions of particular jurisdictions, particularly targeted on this modern social evil, and have vigorous and well-intentioned argument as to whether the provisions denying what some might say would be full due process to persons accused of those crimes too far.
We have time for one more question.
As long as it's
Yes,
not
the
too
lady.
difficult. Yes, right.
Sorry. Mr. Beloff, earlier you told us that Lord Sumption, he gave a talk, he said he found about 900 cases where Magna Carta was cited. But you also said that there are lots of councils who make tenuous submissions with reference to Magna Carta. So I just wanted your view on whether you personally think it's a good argument. Because you say the Magna Carta survives in spirit, you can't actually refer to it. But you talked about the myth, the reality. So what's your view? Do you feel that we should?
Let me just say, it's not meant to be an advertisement, but Peter referred to the article, the lecture that I gave on the anniversary year, an annual lecture, and visiting professor at the University of Buckingham on Magna Carta, and the exercise that I carried out did involve reading every single case in the last a century and a half in which Magna Carta was referred to, and it was out of that you will find examples of where Magna Carta was prayed in aid in propositions that it could not conceivably support. And you will see that judges dealt with the submissions often summarily and sometimes in a rather acidulous way. But I also came to the conclusion that I could find no modern judgment in which Magna Carta was referred to which would have been different if Magna Carta had not existed. Yet, having said all that, one asks oneself the question, as you very pertinently have asked, well, why does it remain important? And the reason it remains important is not only because it doesn't actually provide, especially those who like some historical perspective, to to analyse what was the fundamental right that it sought to protect in particular provisions, in particular Articles 39 and Article 40, but also because references to it bring with it and remind the judiciary of, as it were, the weight of history and what has gone before to bring us to our present state. And even if, as I say, the particular provisions in the Malaysian Constitution or in the European Convention on Human Rights are more precisely drafted and more intensely focused than the provisions and analysis in Magna Carta, nonetheless, it's always important to remember that the law didn't suddenly spring out yesterday. It has a long tradition behind it, and if you've got a century of tradition, you can actually identify the source where all this thinking started. It does lend a certain enhancement to advocacy, and it does add a certain sparkle or polish to judgment.
I agree. I read your paper not once or twice, and the word Magna Carta has been loosely used by the first printed editions of the company law. It was mentioned as the Magna Carta of company law.
Yes.
But since you appear in the House of Lords 50 times and specialize in administrative law, so could I personify you as a Magna Carta of administrative law?
What I could say is we had to read my article twice. That he subjected himself to cruel and unusual punishment.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we have with us Mr. Peter Chant. He is going to make a reply on behalf of all the invited guests. Mr. Peter Chant.
Thank you so much to all of you for coming. I must say that I've learned the use of English language more than law in this session. You can hear the eloquence of the British when they speak, something that we have lost hearing for a long, long time. Anyway, I would like to make, first of all, I'll thank both Peter Koh and Mike Beloff for being here. And we're very fortunate, Ipoh is very fortunate to have eminent personalities like this to come to raise our patients. And this is the purpose of the Haven. We want to bring more and more foreign people and people from KL and the rest of the nation to come and enjoy our facilities. I had a few questions from a few people earlier about our next project in Bintan. So I take this opportunity for 5 to 10 minutes to go through quickly with you what we are doing in Bintan. This is our next project. It's a project 4 times the size of Haven. Thanks to Ipoh, it's given us a reputation to go overseas. And that's the actual picture that we've taken. This is also an actual picture. Actual river. You see the clarity of the waters. I've never seen in my so many years existence here such a beautiful river near a city. This is within 15 minutes from Singapore, and we have pure quality rivers like this, quality seas and quality lake. There's a river mouth, the sea. Going back. This is the river mouth. This is our piece of land, by the way, on the other side with the white sand. We are hunting the sea, the river, and the lake, all three water bodies at the same time. You see what I mean? In my earlier years, when I go to Endau River, Kompit River, and the rivers in the Pahang, they have qualities like this. Sadly, I don't see them anymore. Our land is in a bay, so it's very safe, safe from monsoons and tidal tides, high tides and so on. When we look for a second home, where do we look for? What do we look for? Usually it's away from cities like Ipoh, from major cities like Kuala Lumpur, within 2 hours from a home or city, reasonably well-developed infrastructure and amenities, not overpopulated or underpopulated, safe and secure, clean environment, interesting place, or a place with activity or with nature. This is exactly what Ipoh offers, and this is exactly what Bintan offers as well. So for Singaporeans, this is where they will be looking for, many cities, and now they're advocating Bintan for them, Ipoh and Bintan. So what the absolute essentials that people wish? Of course, like here, say we are duplicating Ipoh, full security, good service, good maintenance, well and fully furnished, availability of basic facilities at reasonable prices, quiet, but not so quiet, with some activity, and for those who prefer activity, we have good service, good and reasonably priced food, sports activities, health activities, health facilities, recreational facilities, near beach or other places of interest, social amenities, children facilities, and transportation. This is exactly what Ipoh and Haven Bintan offers. So we introduce you to the Bintan. Potentially, we feel that Bintan will be the #1 resort in Asia because of the location. It's close to the major city of Singapore. It's very accessible. There's about 8 to 15 ferries a day, and there are 4 airports surrounding Bintan at the moment. It's a Hawaii Middle East. It has a pristine environment.
What is the site of Singapore?
This is the site from Singapore to Bintan, only 41 kilometers. It's about the same distance from Hong Kong to Macau. And there are 4 airports surrounding it. The 2 airports are converted to international airport, and Changi Airport and the new airport being built. 4 airports surrounding it. New airport being built. International routes are opened up. Direct flights from China, from 7 cities in China. They're developing much faster than Ipoh, by the way. A bridge is being proposed from Batam to Bintan. And the Minister supports the bridge, obviously. This is Bintan. It is home to sports and recreational facilities at the moment. Very, very important for that island. All these are actual pictures of on site. 4 golf courses, 18-hole golf courses at the moment. It's said to be a sports tourism destination. It's got Ironman, marathon, and many other activities. New choice for Chinese tourists. We have a tremendous site. Our site is of 26 hectares, 60 acres, surrounded by 3 pristine water bodies, sea, river, and a lake. And only 10 minutes by road to the main ferry, 30 minutes to the new international airport. This is where we are. We saw it just now. And this is our land. This is our beachfront. The trees are not cleared, will not be cleared. We only clear the bushes. That's our beach and that's the sea. Very shallow waters, so it's safe for children. River, lake, and we have comprehensive facilities, more than what we have now, all in one location. All this, there's a night view, car park as well, the first occupied car park on the island, security like here. 5-level swimming pool like here, except fronting the mangrove forest. Children theme park, which we don't have here, not enough land to have something like this there. And the crab design, this is our own creation, our own design. Shaped like this crab, where children can play. Our clubhouse is 48,000 square feet. Mangrove boardwalk, good food like here. And these are all the reasons why we should be looking at Bintan. Especially now that you can buy strata title, foreigners are allowed to buy property, tax haven declared for Bintan, and visa free for 169 nations. 169 nations. Our transaction, we give strata title. Before, there were no strata title to be given to foreigners. Now, it is approved from last year. So, we'll be the first to do that. This is the Indonesian law, just changed. And our selling points, you know from here, we have many selling points. And our prices are only 1/3 compared to Singapore. For the quality, for the same quality. When we built here in Ipoh is the same. We're selling 1/3 KL price, but everybody's screaming it's expensive. So here in Bintan, we have to educate the people why it's not expensive. All our developments have gone up in prices approximately 3 times in 5 years. For Haven, we haven't reached 5 years yet. We need 2 more years to I hope, for it to go up much further. It's managed by the Haven Premier. You will have noticed that we are not using Best Western anymore. We have not used them 3 years ago, but we used that name because we are new. In hotel management, we are very new. So when we found that they were not so good, we took over, but we paid them a licensing fee, and we went on and we terminated the agreement at the beginning of this year, January. These are the awards we've got, 43 so far, and counting more to come this year. These are the different awards. Pepsi, there's 8 Sultan. There's a present Sultan with Michael Beloff have invited to meet him at the palace. There's the Deputy President of Indonesia, the Deputy to Jokowi. And these are our partners in Indonesia, much bigger names than we are. That's our example of a suite, big suite and sleep 5. This is a super king size bed with a day bed, and we can push in another bed, taking up the side table. We can sleep 5. This is a toilets. The size is 550 square feet. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, this ends the formal sessions of our dinner talk. And we can adjourn for dinner and going forward discussion on the